Kamala Harris and Julian Castro are now calling for the impeachment of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh after a report in today's New York Times revealed a new accusation of sexual misconduct. According to the Times, Max Stier, a Yale classmate of Kavanaugh, said that he saw, quote, Kavanaugh with his pants down at a drunken dorm party where friends pushed his penis into the hand of a female student. The Times reports that Stier notified senators and the FBI about his account, but the Bureau did not investigate. The Times also found that a similar allegation by another Yale classmate, Deborah Ramirez, that Kavanaugh waved his penis in her face at a party at Yale was corroborated by at least 7 people, but that the FBI didn't call not one of the 25 potential witnesses Ramirez provided to the Bureau. Donald Trump responded to the story by tweeting that Kavanaugh should start suing people or that the Justice Department should, quote, come to his rescue. Kavanaugh has denied all of the allegations against him. Joining me now by phone is Democratic presidential candidate Julian Castro. And Secretary Castro, thank you for joining me. You're calling for Kavanaugh to be impeached. How likely is it, do you think, that these allegations would get anywhere near making that happen? And have you talked to any House members about it?
Look, we know, whether you're looking at the impeachment of Donald Trump or anybody else, that Mitch McConnell and his buddies, Republican buddies in the Senate, are not likely to lift a finger. But what's happening right now with Donald Trump and what he's doing in the presidency and what happened with this Kavanaugh process is that they're completely undermining our democratic process and the necessity to go by what is truthful and honest, especially when you're talking about somebody sitting on the highest court in the land that is supposed to be the ultimate arbiter of what is right and just. And what became clear... what's become clear is that he should be impeached. The House absolutely has the ability to impeach him. The question would be what the Senate would do. And, I want to know at this point, why did the FBI not follow up on all of these leads that they have? They didn't lift a finger to investigate it. And if they did bring some of that information to the attention of some of those Republican senators, why didn't those senators say anything?
You tweeted that in your view, Brett Kavanaugh lied under oath. You believe he lied during his testimony about these alleged acts of sexual misconduct?
Based on this new information, that's certainly what it appears like, yes, that he lied under oath.
And do you believe then that he is essentially a sexual predator, or that he was at some point?
Yeah, I believe that he engaged in the conduct that was described. Folks would just stop and think for a second. You had, now many people who made very similar allegations about his conduct in different contexts. It wasn't just one episode. And these were people that made these claims well before he was ever a judge, before he was up for the Supreme Court, before he was ever in the limelight. They told other people at that time. And these are folks that themselves, and we've seen with some of the people who came forward, they had a lot to lose in coming forward. They were risking some of their own career, their own reputation, that people know how it is these days. You step into the public eye and you get the blowback, even when you're being truthful about something. And they risked all of that, and they had made the claims years before he ever came up for a vote for the Supreme Court. That tells me that there is truth there. And it is appalling that basically Mitch McConnell and his buddies have stolen a Supreme Court seat twice, once by denying Merrick Garland and the second time by putting this guy on the Supreme Court.
And let me play for a moment. This is the moment in which Brett Kavanaugh, under oath, and keep in mind he is under oath, denies some of the sexual misconduct allegations against him. Take a listen.
Are Ms. Ramirez's allegations about you true?
Those are not. None of the witnesses in the room support that. If that had happened, that would have been the talk of campus in our freshman dorm.
And of course, the story, the big blockbuster story in the New York Times is, of course, it was the talk of campus. At least 7 people knew about it. People knew about it at the time. Do you believe that despite the fact that Ms. Ramirez was prepared to provide 25 witnesses, but none of those witnesses was questioned by the FBI, and according to her in this story, the staff committee members from the Senate Judiciary Committee who spoke with her attempted to imply that it might be a case of mistaken identity. Do you believe that there was misconduct in this case by the FBI, by the Department of Justice, or even by the senators who seemed uninterested in finding out what really happened with this very brief investigation of Mr. Kavanaugh?
Oh, based on this report, I absolutely believe that. In the least, I think the Congress, the House of Representatives, should immediately open up a review, an investigation of why that information was not followed up on by the FBI, why it was not made available to Democrats on that committee. It is completely outside of the bounds of the normal process of a nomination for the FBI not to follow up on those kinds of leads. I mean, that's not just an incompetent investigation. That seems like intentionally bad. And so the House should absolutely begin a review right now.
The implication, at least, of this New York Times story was that it seemed that the Senate Judiciary Committee didn't encourage the information. Do you believe that any sort of investigation into what happened here should also include the Republican members of the Senate Judiciary Committee seeming to want to rush through this nomination and get it through as quickly as possible, or the Department of Justice, who, by the way, William Barr is about to give an award, a very high award, to the people who pushed this nomination through and got it to happen. Do you believe that there should be a broader look at why and who among Republicans, senior Republicans in Washington, and people at the DOJ were willing to seemingly do anything to just make this nomination happen as quickly as possible, by any means necessary?
I absolutely do. I think the American people are owed that. I don't think any of them have clean hands. The Republicans who are controlling that Senate Judiciary Committee, Mitch McConnell, the FBI, Bill Barr, and the DOJ, all of them, this information that we have very compellingly points to trying to cover up that evidence so that it would not make the light of day. It would not. They knew that it would probably derail Kavanaugh's nomination, and they chose to squelch it. That's what this looks like.
The president has tweeted, and normally his tweets are taken almost as instructions. If you listen to Michael Cohen, or the way that he communicates what he wants done is sometimes by implying what he wants done, or sometimes just outright saying it. And we know that William Barr is very compliant with whatever it is he knows that Donald Trump wants him to do, though he's supposed to represent the American people. Are you concerned now, since Donald Trump has suggested both that Brett Kavanaugh starts suing people, but also that the Justice Department step in and come to his rescue? Do you now worry that William Barr will carry out that Twitter order?
Well, I mean, we've seen plenty of examples, as you say, of these departments carrying out the orders of the president in inappropriate ways. But all of us have to remember that, this is so far from normal. It's another reason that we need to beat Donald Trump in 2020, if not impeach him before then. The Justice Department is not supposed to be the personal lawyer of the president or of a Supreme Court justice. The Justice Department is there to do the business of the American people. And so this is another complete distortion by the president of what the Department of Justice is there to do. And it also gives you a hint that it's very easy to believe that they covered up information for the sake of the president wanting to get Brett Kavanaugh appointed to the Supreme Court.
Julian Castro, candidate for President of the United States, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we asked you in very short order, so thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Joy. Take care.
Thank you very much. Okay, I want to bring in Jason Johnson and Tiffany Cross. And now joining by phone is Cynthia Alksne, MSNBC legal analyst. There's so much, Cynthia, that is odd about the Kavanaugh situation. The speed with which he was rushed onto the court, the quickness with which the investigation by the FBI took place, the implications in the New York Times story, that even if FBI agents themselves seemed to want to continue to investigate, they didn't even call 25 people who Ms. Ramirez was willing to give them. There are other people who said they tried to contact the FBI to give information. None of that was investigated. And this seeming rush to get him on the court come what may. What do you make of all this?
Well, what I make is that the White House determined the parameters of the investigation and did not allow the FBI to do it. I'm not sure in this case it's fair to go after the FBI because I think they were told what they could and couldn't do in terms of the investigation. I think, the question is, why didn't this happen? Why didn't this investigation happen? I think we know the answer to that. The answer to that is the White House didn't want it to happen. Grassley and the Republicans didn't want it to happen, and they wanted to rush it through. And then remember what's, add to the outrage is that what does Grassley say at the confirmation hearing? Well, there's no evidence to support these people. Well, you know why there's no evidence? Because they squelched the investigation. Of course, we need to find out exactly what is in this FBI report that has not been released. They've been hiding behind executive privilege to not tell us what's in the FBI report. These witnesses need to be interviewed. We need to determine why the Department of Justice is giving one of the highest awards in the Department of Justice, usually reserved for people who, for example, my friend Barry Kowalski, may he rest in peace, got this award for the Rodney King prosecution, as did the Rodney King prosecutors. Those awards go to people who uncover misuse in mental health facilities. I mean, this is the highest award in the Department of Justice, and it's about to be given for people who their claim to fame is they were covering up sexual assault. It's outrageous that that's what's going on right now, and we absolutely need an investigation.
And beyond that, there's so much that's strange. I'm going to save you one more question here, Cynthia, because among the issues that were on Brett Kavanaugh's plate when he was nominated for a lifetime position on the Supreme Court were these issues of sexual misconduct, which we now know there were more than we even heard about. That sounds familiar to the Clarence Thomas situation, where only some got to testify and we didn't hear all of it. But there were also his debts. I'm sitting here and looking at a Washington Post story from July 11, 2018, in which they talk about the fact that Mr. Kavanaugh incurred tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt buying baseball tickets over the past decades, at times reported liabilities that could have exceeded the value of his cash accounts and investment assets, and that's according to a review of his financial disclosures. The credit card debts and other debts reported to be between $60,000 and $200,000 accrued over 3 credit cards and a loan, which then were paid off or fell below the reporting requirements in 2017 in a very short order. And there has never been a full explanation of that, of his debts suddenly, dropping by a lot, and then also these allegations. Do you believe that there was any corruption involved in the pushing of Mr. Kavanaugh onto the Supreme Court?
Well, I believe he was not qualified because of not only, when he had a drinking problem when he was younger, which led to these sexual assaults. But I also didn't think he was qualified because I thought he doesn't have the temperament to be a Supreme Court justice based on his behavior in the hearing. And I also disagreed with him vehemently about, he fundamentally, and here's something that goes, I see in the arc of his life, and that is he's sort of a bully for people who are from the wrong side of the tracks, right? The women who he sexually abused were women when he got drunk he thought he could take advantage of because they were not as big and as powerful and as he was. And then if you read his dissent opinions, particularly this one about the little girl in Texas who needed an abortion, there's a disdain in his voice, in his writing voice, for people who are less affluent and really lucky in life than he has been. And that's why I thought he wasn't qualified. I don't know about the baseball tickets because I was so overwhelmingly convinced that he did not belong as a justice of the Supreme Court. He's obviously a brilliant guy. There are a lot of brilliant people that could be chosen. No one has a God-given right to sit on the Supreme Court, and I cannot believe in a country of 300 million people we can't find somebody better than this.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn to the panel here. This is somebody who was placed on the court by the smallest margin in U.S. history. Even questions about it. He only got on by 50 to 48. Lisa Murkowski, notably the Alaska senator, voted present, so she did not vote for him. Joe Manchin was the only Democrat who voted for him. She said she would have voted no, but as a courtesy to another senator, Lisa Murkowski voted present. So he didn't even get 51 votes. Right. which is odd. He didn't even get the one extra that you're supposed to get, yet he's on the court for life. And interestingly enough, rules absolutely the way that Donald Trump wants all the time. Which may lead us to an explanation as to why the Republicans were so desperate to get him there, with subpoenas, questions of whether subpoenas need to be listened to, questions about whether Donald Trump has to follow the rule of law, all coming right to the court.
So this is giving me a flashback to all the disgusting things that I thought about Brett Kavanaugh last year. We'll go through the technical things first. There's the mysterious debt. We don't know where that went. We have no idea where that went. Right. I don't know anybody who spends that much money on national tickets, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. Then you have the thousands of legal documents, right? Things that he wrote in the Bush administration that Republicans wouldn't turn forward. Then you have a history of sexual assault. I said last year, Joy, I've never heard of a guy who's a one-time rapist. I've never heard of a guy who's a one-time sexual assaulter. I grew up with guys like this. He's from around this area, right? He's the fifth guy in a gang rape, okay? He's the guy who comes in after he's drunk because everybody else encourages him. He can get away with it. And he's been pretty much covered his entire life. And now he's on the Supreme Court where he can move that same despicable, misogynistic attitude that he's gotten away with his entirely cowardly life to the greatest misogynist of all, which is the President of the United States. And lastly, I'll say this, and it's just like your last guest mentioned. It has amazed me that we have an administration that out of the millions of people who are qualified in this country of all races and genders, they consistently find men who beat, abuse, and sexually assault women. This ain't the first, the second, the fourth, or even the fifth guy that we have found, like this nest of vipers that has infested this entire state. And I'm not surprised that we found this out about Brett Kavanaugh, but I will be equally disgusted because if we don't have a Speaker of the House who will go after the president for this kind of behavior, I doubt she'll do anything about Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, let me read what Kamala Harris said. Kamala Harris tweeted, I sat through those hearings, and she's on the Judiciary Committee. Brett Kavanaugh lied to the U.S. Senate and, most importantly, to the American people. He was put on the court through a sham process, and his place on the court is an insult to the pursuit of truth and justice. He must be impeached. We sit here today, Tiffany Cross, with 2 out of 5 conservative members of the court. I'm not a math person, but somebody do the math. 2 out of 5 have been accused of gross sexual misconduct. 2 out of 5 of the conservatives, and we're all pushed onto the court mostly by men. Privileged men, white men. And who now can do the bidding of corporations, of people who want to take women's rights of their own bodies away from them, can rule against voting rights. They have incredible power over the rest of us. What do you make of that situation?
I mean, who can do the bidding, who are doing the bidding. And let me just say, I mean, I think there's some sort of false hope, like, man, if only we knew about this accuser during the confirmation. What do we think that was going to do?
Well,
like,
Susan Collins is going to be more
exactly. Susan Collins had that dramatic floor speech written the day he was nominated. You know, I really think maybe she just likes the attention to say, everybody's looking at me to see what I'm going to do. We know what you're going to do. We've seen it several times. We saw when Kamala Harris was questioning him, and she asked him a very simple question. Have you talked about the Trump case with anybody? And he was quite frankly confounded and just didn't know how to answer. I know a liar when I see one. This is just basic common sense. And somebody please give me the audacity of a mediocre white man, because if you could sit before this Judiciary Committee and behave in such a belligerent and indignant way, that, my friends, is white privilege. Because there is no way any person of color or any woman could have sat there and screamed about how, you know, me and Opie and Tommy were best friends and drank beers and lifted weights and, you know, we were all buddies just living this great life. And what came out of that is, man, it's such a dangerous time for these white men out here. They are the real victims of all of this. And to your point, their squad, Donald Trump likes to attack squads, their squad is filled with, like you said, wife beaters, accused pedophiles.
Everything.
Exactly. It's a very strange situation we're looking at, not just at the Supreme Court, but also at the DOJ.
Yeah, well, and I want to, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to dig into that DOJ piece of it, because the person who seems to be in the fulcrum of making sure that these people are protected, that their privileges are protected, seems to be one guy, William Barr. We're going to talk a little bit more when we come back after break.